All right. With that, I think that we will go ahead and get started.
Yeah. Excellent.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Hallie, and I'm a member of the Quad Education team, and we're thrilled to have you all here for this How to Answer Why This College Like a Pro webinar, where we'll talk about how to answer the why this college question that you will inevitably be asked over and over and over again while you are applying to schools. Quad Education is a college application consulting company, and where we are here to help students and families through the entire college application process, from just beginning to think about college in middle school, early high school, all the way through actually, starting school and saying you are going or committing to the school that you want to go to. We have two fantastic panelists with us today who are fantastic Quad Education admissions consultants who work with our students and families and are pros on this topic. And I'll have them introduce themselves in just a moment. But first, let's talk about what we're going to go over today. So we'll introduce our panelists. We'll talk about the importance of the why this college question. We'll talk about how to determine your motivations for applying to specific schools, how to research colleges to answer that question. We'll go step by step on how you'll use that information in your application, and then we'll open things up for a Q&A. So if you have a question, pop them in the chat or question box, and we will get to those at the end. You'll also be sent a recording of this webinar, so you'll be able to refer back to it. We have Darryl and Nick here with us today. Darryl, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, great. Good evening, and thank you all so much for joining us. My name is Darryl Tiggle, and I'm one of the consultants here at Quad, and really excited about this evening's topic because we're going to cover, I think, probably one of the most important things we're considering in this journey. Why are you choosing the colleges that you're looking at? And for a long time, I sat on the college admissions side of the desk and read those essays about why this college or why they were appropriate for a particular place. So we hope to give you lots of insight into this journey and field a lot of your questions. And you've got two great team members working together.
All right, awesome. Thanks, Darryl. It's always a pleasure to have you. And Dr. Nick, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. So good evening, everybody, or wherever you are in the world right now. We have students all over the world. I'm talking to you from lovely Houston, Texas, and it is a very temperate 98 degrees right now. You may have heard we are having a heat wave here. But anyway, nonetheless, worked at Vanderbilt University, my alma mater, also worked at the University of Pennsylvania. And I've been working with Quad for about 2 years, but I've been on both the admission side and the secondary school side as director of college counseling at lots of different high schools. I'm originally from the Northeast, but I spent a lot of my adult life in the South, so my accent's this weird blend of different things, if you're wondering about that. And I tell you, before we actually got started here, Darryl and I were just talking about what this question is, because it's something that I think can be very confounding to students and working with them and their parents, but it's also something that's actually pretty easy. And what we hope to do tonight is give you that insight, regardless if you want to apply to, Tufts or Vanderbilt or wherever. We're going to give you all those specific ideas as to how to make sure that your answer is really getting to what they're going for. So with all that said, thank you so much for all joining us tonight, and we'll have a great time.
Fantastic. Thanks, Nick. It's a pleasure to have you here as well. And thanks for joining us in the extreme heat.
Yeah, thank
you. I hope you have some air conditioning.
Yeah.
All right. I think we went a slide ahead there.
Oh, I'm sorry.
All right. So let's talk about understanding the importance of the why this college question.
Doctor, why don't you give him the first shot?
Sure. I would say this, the reason they're asking why this college, and you'll find these tend to be the more highly selective places. So you're going to find that this question comes up a fair amount. And I'm thinking about this because one of my dearest friends in the world works at Rice University, 2 miles up the street. And she's Houston born and raised. She went to Rice. The owl is her mascot, so she always has owl jewelry and stuff. And Rice has a question. Why Rice? Just like NYU or Tufts or Vanderbilt or Penn or any of these places, they're going to ask you, why are you applying here? And that sounds like kind of like basic to some degree, but the most important advice I could give, if you hear nothing else, and I imagine Darryl will agree, but be specific. So when I remember, like, very fondly, and I've said it's a lot of students, like when I worked at Penn, my dean used to say, does this person want to come here because of what we have to offer and be part of our community, or are they applying, quote, because it's Penn? I have another good friend. She's like third in command at NYU, and they have a question like, why NYU? So you got to look at their market, right? They got Fordham, Barnard, Columbia, like all those places, right? Why here? Like what specifically about us? So when students write, well, there's so much to do in New York. Yeah, they know that. What would you like to do? So the more specific you can be, that's going to make it a better answer. So instead of saying like, I want to join the student newspaper, name the student newspaper. I want to do community service, name community service clubs. Like, what do you want to do? How do you want to like get yourself into that community? Not just the community, it's like not just the campus itself, but also the city it's in. Like, that's what makes it that much better. So as you're going at these places and you're visiting, write down stuff you like write down like, hey, that looked really cool. That was kind of awesome. The more specific you can be, the better. That makes a way more compelling answer.
Yeah, I totally agree. And one of the things I say when I'm thinking about this, the why part of this process, right? It's kind of a two-way street. You are in a very, very personal way, you're wanting them to ask themselves, why Darryl? Why Nick, right? And you're going to put into your application very specific things about yourself that help them understand why Darryl, why Nick. That's the same thing they're asking for in these applications. And they understand, because of freedom of choice and because there's so many great schools out there, that you might be applying to more than one or two or five colleges, right? So to enable them to understand that you've really done the research and been able to ascertain why you're a good match for that place academically and personally. And like the doctor said, that specificity is key.
Absolutely.
All right. Excellent.
All right.
Excellent.
So let's talk about determining your motivations for applying to specific schools. This is a tough one.
All right. Well, the motivation piece, and I often dial back to think about this being a place that you want to find a good match, right? And a good fit. So as you're thinking about colleges, I often pick on my parents and my students and my family when they find out what I do, and they say, Mr. Tiggle or Darryl or cousin, I want to go to an Ivy League school. And I say, I think you mean good school. They go, no, I mean Ivy League school. I go, I think you mean good. And they're like, no. And I say, why? And they can't really describe their motivation behind it. And I tell them, I go, look, all of those schools are super different. Like Columbia and Dartmouth, they couldn't be more different, right? So if your motivation is to go to a good school, which I think that's what it is, you need to be able to ascertain what makes a good school, what makes a school good. And name kind of does, but the name makes it good because of the factors that we're looking at. Academic programs, faculty, research, curriculum, location, campus culture, extracurriculars, dorm life, placement after college, right? There are lots of things that sort of make a school good, and you want to find a school that's good for you. So when you're thinking about motivation behind why you apply, think about these categories here, and then expand it by another 20 different things that help you understand if that's a school that's a good match for you, right? And then that will enable you to write more compelling essays. That will enable you to tell more compelling stories as to why you're a good match for that place.
Absolutely. I could not agree more with everything that Darryl just said. And I would tell you, like, the Ivy League are just 8 schools in the Northeast in an athletic league that are really hard to get into. MIT is not an Ivy.
Wait a second. There's only 8?
There's only 8.
MIT's not one?
MIT's not one. Stanford's not one. Chicago's
Duke,
not one. Georgetown's
Duke's
not
not
one.
one?
USC's not one. Duke's not one. Emory's not one. Rice isn't one. Vanderbilt's not one. I mean, Tufts isn't one. Like, so that's the thing is, and I will tell you too, like one thing that Darryl said that really resonated with me is like, I have had hundreds of family meetings with students, all different interests and desires of what they want to do. I have never had a family say, well, we don't want to go to a good college. So there's always like this idea of like a good college, right?
Right.
And I'll tell you, like, I think I imagine Darryl has a similar experience. Like, I have visited hundreds of college campuses, mostly in the United States, some abroad, but there's places that were not even remotely on my radar in high school that I go, oh my God, this place is awesome. I totally would have gone here. So I always tell students, and I would say this to each and every one of you, like, the good news is there are hundreds of places you can be happy at. The bad news is you got to go find what they are. But that's the thing, like, as Darryl was saying, like, it's a fit. It's not like I went to ultra elite place or really prestigious place and afterward I get my house in France and milk and honey. That's not what happens. Like, how did that work for you? So it's not about that place per se. And I always joke about this. Somewhere right now, there is someone who is the dead last in the Harvard class of 2023. Dead last.
Mm-hmm.
So all that to say, like, it's about what you do with it. And that can be hard. And it's really easy to get caught up in rankings and prestige and all that happens. But all that to say, like, if you can show them, because we're talking about explicitly, like, why are you applying there? At Penn, we knew that Wharton was a great business school. We didn't want anyone to really tell us that. We wanted to hear, what would you do with that experience? Like, what sort of things would you like? And whether, that's on your list or it's on your list, like, whatever these places are, tell them, like I would say, show them that you know them. So that's the thing. And that's exactly what can help you with a quad.
Love it. What's next? Doctor, again, you're on a roll. Give it to him.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, like, so these tours can kind of blend together when you look at the websites and like the literature that you get. It can all kind of blend together a little bit, and that's okay. And again, like, they're a lot of these places are awesome, and they're kind of similar. Like, the tours kind of generate, but as one thing that Darryl said, like, a student who's happy at Dartmouth may not be happy at Columbia. They're both Ivy League, they're both Northeast, but those are very different campuses in lots of ways. And that you mentioned that with many institutions. The more you can say, hey, when I saw this, I like that would be good. So instead of saying, like, sometimes I've noticed when I'm reading these, like the Why Us essays, will say, well, the student faculty ratio is 8-1, and I really benefit from small classrooms. They know that, but instead say, Professor so-and-so is teaching this thing, and I really like that, and that helps my interest too. So basically what you're trying to go for is, when I saw this, I like this and saw fit, and that's how I'm going to use it. Like, that's what they're going for. Like, that's kind of it. It's one of those things where I think a lot of students, like, struggle with this question, but it's like they just want to know, like, if we gave you this opportunity, of all the universities in the world, why are you applying here? That's what they're going for. They want to hear what that is. And I would say roughly, like, I mean, Darryl, you can agree with me or not on this, but, like, I would say, like, roughly, like, half of the people who work in admissions offices are alums of that place. Yeah. So the more you can, like, speak to that's kind of cool. Like, I'm like, oh, they know us. Like, they said they knew that professor. They knew with that tradition.
My first job in admissions was at my alma mater, Union College, and that's where I learned so much about admissions. And the thing that I wanted to, kind of, pile on, as we're making the example with Penn, they know they have a great, business school. It's talking about the genuine connection that you have to things that happen on those campuses. So if you've got a major in mind and you've gone to that campus and you toured and you might have had the opportunity to visit a class, talk about how the class turned you on. Talk
Absolutely.
about the manner of the professor. Talk about things that again, they know exist, but they know that you would have had to interact with them. You would have had to engage them. You would have had to drink in some of the things that you're learning on the website that go beyond, no offense, everyone knows about the Wharton School. people probably don't know a single professor that teaches
Absolutely.
in that school until they get a chance to go there and engage. So make sure that that genuine connection, I think, really requires going another level deeper. Like, so knowing it's Ivy League, that's great. Knowing where it's located, that's great. Going deeper levels as you're starting to interact with schools and engage them, that really helps you get a genuine connection and an authentic story that you're telling in your application, that the people like Dr. Nick and myself, when we read it and we went to those schools, we said, yeah, they know us. I would have liked to go to school with them. They're the type of student that would fit at this place. And it is that authenticity is where that comes through.
Absolutely. And I'll tell you, like, one thing I was thinking about as we're talking about, it's like, we say be specific. I cannot tell you how many students where I've read why, wherever they go. And if I go to that university, I can study abroad. Pretty much everyone has study abroad. So I use this with my clients all the time with Quad. I say, look, like, everyone has study abroad. A better answer is when I saw you had this program and it fit my interest in this. So for example, a lot of students want to study abroad in Italy. That's awesome. Okay, so Wake Forest has an awesome house on the Venetian Canal. Like, that's really cool. So saying, when I saw you had the Venetian Canal house, I'm like, that's a way better answer than, and I can study abroad there. You can study abroad pretty much everywhere, So all that to say, like try to be specific, speak their language, show them that you know them, use their jargon.
Amen.
Yeah.
So it sounds like we're saying you're essentially giving the college a compliment, and you want to say something like, I like that you have green eyes, instead of, I like that you have eyes.
Correct.
And I love it. If this doesn't sound too weird, it's a compliment, letting them know how beautiful you think they are because of their characteristics.
Yes.
Not just because they're a college with a pretty name.
Exactly.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I love it.
All right. Let's take a second to talk about researching schools. And we have other webinars on this. This is a topic that goes beyond the few slides that we'll talk about here, but we're going to talk about this as it pertains to figuring out why you might want to go to a school and how to kind of figure out the specific compliment that you want to give.
Exactly.
All right. Well, I mean, research, obviously, in anything that you're doing when you want information is the most important journey you should be taking. And, you want to know about the academic resources. You want to know about the faculty. You want to know about the campus culture, because, again, every place has academic programs, but the academic culture, the tenor of the classroom, they may differ. The way that faculty engage might differ amongst different colleges. So make sure you're doing the research to find out how colleges are unique, or how they are different from other schools that you might be looking at. But that's because that's what's going to come out in your conversations, in your essays about those schools. And the research for a long time, and this is something that's still pretty important in the admissions game, but demonstrating interest or demonstrated interest, right, used to be an important thing that was kind of a factor in admissions, and it's diminished in its sort of its influence. However, being able to demonstrate that you're interested in a college is essential, right? Because that's how your output is going to come out. So make sure that you know about the schools that you're looking at, and then know the admissions offices want to know that you've done the research, and your competition, those who are winning, they're doing research, and it's easy. Get on the mailing list. Follow them on Instagram. Please reply to their emails and outreach. And I'll follow up with later on that. But I'm going to, again, please reply to their emails and outreach.
Yeah, and I'll just say, like, as Darryl was saying, like, demonstrate interest is, and I've often joked about this, it's the most impossible thing to explain, because not every place does it, and not every place does it the right way. So all that to say, though, like, I'll give you an example. So, right here in Houston, we've got Rice right here. It's 2 miles up the street from me. The high school I used to work at here, which is 4 miles up the road from Rice, they would say, like, look, we expect that a student who goes to high school 4 miles away could kind of mosey their way on campus at some point. A student from Northern Maine, they're probably less concerned about that. So that can be a thing. And it's hard because, again, not every place does it, and not every place does it the same way. But it is something that, all that to say, like, yeah, when they reach out to you, like, there are places that absolutely look at that and see if you respond and whatnot. There's always a context to it. And I think there's a lot of anxiety about this, but all that to say, like, Darryl's right. Like, if they reach out to you, like, say, hey, that was great. That was cool. All right.
Well, this just looks like a really good checklist, doesn't it, Nick?
Yeah, exactly. Like, and what I would say is, like, looking at this, like, all of this is stuff you should do before you visit the college and actually look at it and, like, talk to them. But these are things to, like, think about, like, hey, what sort of clubs do they have? What sort of things, can you get involved in? The other thing is, like, high school, like, we often use the word in academia, like, your curriculum is, prescriptive. Like, everyone's taking kind of the same things. But in college, you can take classes and disciplines that you never had in high school. So, yeah. So look at these. Exactly. Sorry.
No, I just think it's a good, easy to read roadmap and checklist where a lot of the things, and I kind of chuckle to myself, weren't really available as research opportunities when I was looking at college, like going on the website and researching at college, right? You had to get something in the mail or take a ride or see a person. So the luxury, and I know it's been around for a while, to visit colleges virtually. It's really a good way to try on as many schools as you want to before you put any real effort into, continuing with a school, and knowing that the things that they do on campus, they're also delivering online. So you can do your first run of research and add schools in and subtract them from your computer. So that's a really good way to know, you've got to do the work, but it's not too heavy a lifting if you've got internet and access. And then as you learn more about a school, that's when you can decide, do I need to book a bus ticket or a train ticket or fill up the car and tell parents to bring me to campus? That research helps you both bring schools onto your list and kind of narrow them down as you start to cull your list later in the process.
Absolutely. And I also, like, share this, like, I was just kind of thinking about this myself. I tell students all the time, you might go to really renowned, wonderful school, everyone wants to go there, and it just doesn't feel right. Like, and I've been on, again, hundreds of campuses where I go, look, like, a lot of times, like, there's never been a place I've gone, this place is horrible, they should shut their doors right now. I've never felt that. But on occasion, I go, look, I would never go here, but this might be perfect for a student with whom I'm working. And I find that all the time. But all that to say, like, sometimes I've had students visit, these world-renowned campuses that everyone in the world wants to go to. And I go, okay, so you went to very famous school. What'd you think? Oh, my God, Dr. A, it was terrible. I didn't like this. I didn't like this. We got lost. It was cold. It was weird. And I say, oh, okay, so you're not applying? Oh, no, of course I'm applying because it's super prestigious college. And I go, trust your gut. Like, if you're not happy, it doesn't matter how wonderful the place is. There's lots of places you can be happy at. So you got to find that, like, that fit. Like Darryl was talking about earlier, like, fit. Like how are you using it? It's not the place, it's what you do with it. And I think that's a hard understanding for a lot of families, to be totally honest. But all that to say, like, you do like a thorough college search, you think about what you like and what you're going for, you'll be very successful.
And Doctor, you opened a door of something I just wanted to continue with. When my families come back, my students come back, my clients come back, and they go to a visit, the things that make a school good, so the faculty, the resources, the dorm life, those things, they're all palpable. And they say, I go, how was class? They're like, oh, it was awesome. How are the resources? They're like, oh, they were awesome. How was the faculty? They go, awesome. I go, how was the reputation and ranking? How did that feel on campus? They're like, what are you talking about? I go, was that palpable at all? Did you feel like everyone was super smarter or more? Like, no. I'm like, then look, let's always think about the reputation and rankings as something that is a factor, but not the lead factor, because never when you go to campus do you ever even recognize that. Yeah. Right? It's the most important thing guiding your search, but there's no reputation or ranking monument on any campus.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and that's the thing. It's like it's hard to not get swept up in that.
Yeah.
And like Darryl and I worked at like selected places and Union, Vanderbilt, Tufts. Like these are places that are. But all that to say, like it's not about where. I always tell students, like, there's two names in your diploma. One is your own name, and the other name is the name of your school.
Yeah.
Your name is more important than anywhere that you went. Like, it's what you did with that. And again, that's a hard pill to swallow, but that's what I wish more families would understand. But again, I get it. It's hard.
I'm stealing that example, Doctor.
Yeah. go for it, please, by all means.
All right. So when you are applying to schools, if you have supplemental essays or interviews, you will most likely be asked, why do you want to go to X university? So Darryl and Nick are going to walk us through how to tackle that question.
All right. Excellent. So, the supplemental essays, there's going to be a few of them. And Nick, tell me it'll be, why this institution? Why do you want to pursue this academic path? Maybe what kind of impact you've made in your community, and what kind of impact would you like to make when you come here? These supplemental essays, in so much they're trying to figure out how good of a match you are for their institution, they also want to know what kind of impact you're going to make at their institution. What kind of academic scholar are you? What kind of classmate, roommate, teammate might you be? And given the things that are important to you in the world, what contribution are you going to make to our community to solve those problems or heighten those issues on campus? They're asking you to speak about who you are, and those supplemental essays are digging a little bit deeper. In so much as we've asked you, dig a little deeper when you're looking at schools. They're going to dig a little bit deeper in your application, and that comes through your testimonies and your supplemental essays.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I would also say too, like, it was kind of as Darryl was talking about, I kind of thought about this. So one thing that happens in the college counseling world. So when I worked on the high school side, a lot of times colleges, universities will do what's called a counselor fly-in. And what that means is they fly in college counselors from all over the country, public schools, private schools, large, small, everywhere. And you go there and they take you around, they wine you and dine you, and then you tell them how awesome their college is. So when I went to Hamilton's counselor fly-in upstate New York, wonderful liberal arts school, they said a lot of times, and Darryl probably knows this, like sometimes like there's like a whole itinerary, it's like a little cruise ship, it's like you have this panel, you have that panel. That's not what Hamilton did. Hamilton's like, okay, you can go to classes. If you have students who attend here, you can hang out with them. You can go on a tour. You can go you can go into town if you'd like, or you can watch committee. And I did committee, as an admissions officer myself, and I miss committee. I loved committee. And so I went there, and it was the evaluation was similar to what I had at Vanderbilt and Penn, but it was different. It was a little bit different. And I remember at the end, we were not allowed to speak. And occasionally I would go, look, I think kids like this. Like, I think it might be like this. But for the most part, we're like, nope, do you just watch? You don't say a word. And at the end, they're like, they always have these like crazy titles, but they're vice provost for enrollment management or whatever. She goes, any questions of anything you saw today? And I said this, and I've always reflected on this. I wish families could see how thoughtful you guys were about this. Because it was really, it's not as nitpicky as you think it is. There's not like a list or like a checklist of things they're looking for in an essay or what have you. It's actually way more human. And this may sound weird, but I tell a lot of students, I go, and I tell parents, I go, if you're wondering, where are they looking for? What would you want to see? That's probably the answer. So it's kind of like that. And, again, it's hard. It's a mystical thing. It's weird. I often joke, like when I was doing this process myself as an applicant, I was a nervous wreck. I was in my college counselor's office all the time. Like, so I get it, but it's way more fair than you think. And my dean used to always say, we strive for a fairness we never quite obtain. We're trying to be as cognizant about different places and all this stuff. It's hard though, but they're trying. So I hope that's a good takeaway.
Nick, I'm going to have you rewind just a second, and
Sure.
Can you just explain what committee is, if anyone here doesn't know?
Yeah, so committee, there's different styles to committee, and I've seen a couple of different models, but basically committee is admissions committee where the admissions officers talk about their students and their territory. And the way it worked at Vanderbilt and Penn, which is what you'd find, and I imagine Tufts is probably similar, but what you would do is like, you would go in, and I always said, I never admitted any students from my territory. I admitted other students from other people's territory. I went to committee, and I used to always say in my territory, I go, I work for two people. I work for the university, and there's certain things I have to look for and things I have to, but I also work for you. I'm your representative. So I would go in there, guns blazing for my kids, all this stuff. And it's hard because I think the hardest lesson when I worked with like first year admissions officers, I'd say the hardest thing you have to learn is that you can love the student. They can have the most amazing story ever, but you may not be able to admit them. And that's hard. And that's things like most of these students are very likable. Like there's very few students I read, I'm like, what a jerk. Like it very rarely happen. So I'll just say like committee is where you try to get your colleagues to agree with what you want to do. And I'll say like, sometimes I'm like, I want to admit, and they're like, no, here's why. And I go, oh, that's a good point. And sometimes I'm like, I'm not thrilled by this, but they would go, well, you ever consider this? So your mind changes, and that's part of it, so I always say like there's objective data where here are the grades, here's the test score, that's what it is. But the subjective stuff like that can be different. And I will say like what's interesting is every admissions officer comes from a different background, and that can absolutely inform kind of what their thinking is. So
yeah, I think that insight into committee is super important because that's where most of the work for selection is done. And where these essays and these responses are being analyzed.
Yeah, absolutely.
Perfect. Thank you for that. All right. So supplemental essays. Let's talk about how to tackle the why this college question in supplemental essays for schools.
Why don't we just trade off? I'll take step one. How's that? All right.
Sure.
And look, researching the college, it can come in many different ways. The easiest way, research their website, gather information about their programs, their campus culture, their faculty, what have you. But also research them through other venues. There's ways in which students can follow colleges on their Instagram. If there's an academic major you're interested in, you can follow that department. One of the other things that happen at high schools and in communities all around the world, college fairs. Colleges will do high school visits. They'll have a reception at the Marriott. So any way you might be able to engage them, just like the doctor said, not easy to get to Rice University if you live in New Hampshire, right? But you might be able to get to the New Hampshire Boys Club if they're doing an info session there. So make sure that you find ways in which you can engage information about the college, and those opportunities abound.
Yeah, Darryl actually hit upon something that I think is a really powerful tool. So there's what's called in admissions. I think Tufts did this too. There's what's called joint travel. So basically, it's it's your whatever school you're working at, and it's like 4 other colleges. And so they'll be at the Marriott or the Hilton or whatever in your town. And you might, and here's the thing too, and like I tell students all the time, like, okay, you might really want to go there because mom went to one of those schools and you're really excited about it, and that's great. But the other 4 you may not have considered. And so oftentimes there's a lot of overlap, but sometimes they're in vastly different regions, and they have the different sizes and cultures and whatnot. But it's a great way to see a bunch of different schools. And I tell students all the time, like, keep an open mind. There's a lot of places out there that are awesome. Like, they just are. So, but you got to go do your homework. You got to go look at them. And that's the one thing that we can help with at Quad. So when I have students, sometimes I'll say, okay, what's your top choice right now? So sometimes I'll say to students, I go, okay, if you had to pick right now, you got everywhere you applied, wherever you go right now. And they would tell me whatever school. And I would say, okay, if you like this place, here's other places that would also kind of fit that, like, that place that might be, your cup of tea. And I've certainly recommended schools to students and they loved it. And I've certainly recommended schools and students are like, I don't know what you were thinking, Dr. A. This place was crazy. Like, sure. Okay, cool. But we work with you. We try to find places that you're going to like.
All right. Reflect on your interest and your goals. And, this is important because your personal interests and goals, you can identify specific things about the college that intersect with what you want to do, right? So I often sometimes think about, I say, reflect on your interests and goals, but I also say, reflect on your learning style, right? And your ambition, right? So some students really thrive in a classroom with 500 students where they're learning from everyone in the environment. Some students, like me, I need to be able to ask a bunch of questions and speak up all the time, and then to see the teacher after class. So I need a school for which that learning style is a good fit, right? I'm a mountain biker and a hiker and a gardener and the like. I love New York City and Boston and the like, but for college, I needed to be somewhere with woods and hills and the like, right? It didn't have much to do with my academic work, but it had to do something to do with my balance in life, right? So your research should help you be able to ascertain easily, where is the school? How big is it? City, country, town, suburb, right? And then how does that intersect with your interests and your goals? Your interests are things that you're interested in now and what you might want to do later. Your goals are things that you want to achieve now and that you want to achieve later. So think about the setting, the faculty, the learning environment, and how that intersects with what you want to experience for 4 years, right? And then you're going to continue to evolve, but we want you to make sure that you're reflecting on your size and your fit, so that you go out and buy the things that are gonna feel best on you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd also say to like students, like this is a time in your life where you can kind of pick to some degree where you're going to live. Like, and so, I was from the Northeast and I wanted to see something different. So I applied to 8 schools, which at the time was a lot. Now it kind of not, but anyway. And my dad said, you have to stay on the east side of the Mississippi. So I applied to Tulane and WashU, which are on the Mississippi, because I was a border pusher. But anyway, all that to say, like, I experienced something different. I experienced an entire different way going to school in Tennessee and going to Nashville. And again, that can be like, I have students sometimes they'll say, I want to go to Canada. I want to go to the UK. I think that's kind of their thing. So, embrace that. But, all that to say, like, yeah, at the same token, like, why are you going there? Like, what about that place is going to help you get to whatever the next step is, whatever that means for you.
Awesome. And, the personal connection, we may not have talked enough about. You're going to go there, you're going to study, you're going to excel, what have you. But they really want to know what kind of people are coming to campus, what kind of roommates, what kind of citizens, right? And they know what kind of things go on campus. They know their traditions. They know the things that they're good at and have a long-standing history. And students that are down with that, they're down with them, right? Be able to explain that the things that go on those campuses outside of the daily, classroom environment are things that intersect with things that you already do, or things that you aspire to sort of bring into your extracurricular resume, because they want students who are going to come there, and most of your time in college, and I think people have told you this before, is outside of the classroom, right? And everyone that goes to that college is probably a pretty strong scholar, and similar scholars, but they're different people, right? So they want to understand, what are your personal connections? What kind of things resonate about that college with you already? And what kind of new exciting characteristics and energy are you going to bring to that campus with your own wealth of experience and goals and ambition?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like, one thing we always would, you often hear admissions officers say, like, we're building a class. And like, what I remember, one thing we always talked about was, we want this student from this background, whatever that might be. We want them to talk to the student from a totally different background and find each other odd and argue and teach each other. That's what college was all about. So we would try to do that. We'd say, like, this is a student where we don't have a voice like this on our campus yet, or maybe we already have that, but maybe they're going to learn from these other people. So that was kind of a thing that we looked for. So all that to say, like, look at their culture. The other thing I tell a lot of students is, when you're writing the, why us, look at their mission statement. Like, look at their founding. Like, what's some of these I think about Bates College all the time. Like, Bates was like super speaking of Northern Maine, in Northern Maine, super progressive way before that was a thing. Like, and so, you can like speak to that. Like, what's that about? One of my favorite schools in the world, Loyola Marymount in Los Angeles, Jesuit school. You go to their chapel, and then there's stained glass windows, and they have famous scientists that are there. That's very much the Jesuit tradition. That's cool. Like, talk about that. If that's your thing, if it's not your thing, that's fine. But like, these places have like distinct differences that you can really identify if it's a good fit for you. And if so, like, go for it. Talk about it.
Doctor, I'm gonna rewind back to the committee days, and audience, sure. Listen to this. Often after very thoughtful, very complex discussions, talking about rigor of curriculum, essays, and the like, it would boil down to, and everybody wait on this. Hey, gang, would you like this person as a roommate?
Yes. We
Remember
actually had that
question
exact
at the
absolutely.
end of committee. Would you like this person as a roommate? And a lot of the time it came through the personal connection that we could see that came through those supplemental essays saying, they know what our food's like. They know what our teams are like. They know what our dorms are like. I'm going to live with this kid.
Yeah. Darryl could not have said that better. Like, we used to always say, would you want this person on campus? And then the next question would be, do you want this person in your class? And then the next question was always, do you want this person to be your roommate? Yeah. And look, there's plenty of people that I didn't want to be my roommate, but I liked them. So it's not that precise. But well, let's say like, yeah, you're trying to build that class, you're trying to build that community, and I think and that's what I've noticed in talking to other admissions colleagues who have worked at all different institutions across the country. It's kind of very similar. There's different styles, but for the most part, like, yeah, like, again, like, what are they looking for? What would you want to see?
That's right.
All right, we're going to talk a little bit more about the supplemental essay and speed through this one a little bit quicker than normal, just so we can make sure we have enough time for Q&As at the end. And so just a reminder, if you do have questions, pop them in that chat and Q&A box, and we will get to those in just a few minutes.
Doctor, go get him.
Yeah, so I'm going to definitely say, like, the more you can show the connection to them, the better. So it's funny, like Darryl and I were kind of talking about this a little bit before we got on the call here. So when I was at Vanderbilt, we used to have a why Vanderbilt? Like, again, of all the universities ever, like, why are you applying here? And we knew that our overlaps were, Rice, Emory, Tulane, Duke, like those sorts of places. But anyway, at one point, one student said, I went to Fido. Now, that may not mean anything to anybody. Fido is an off-campus coffee shop that was built in an old pet store, thus the name Fido. All the drinks are named after, like, dogs and stuff. That's where I studied. And actually, as an admissions officer, when I graduated college and grad school, I read applications there. And they said, I would love to go to Fido. Now, that's not officially anything at all with Vanderbilt, but the fact is that's where everybody went. And I'm like, he knows Fido. He's one of us. Like, I think that's kind of what I was going for. So the more you can show that fit, the more you can be general. Like, there's, like, if you pick any city, I always think of my friend at NYU, there's lots of things to do in New York City. Yes, it's a big city. There's lots of, what do you want to do there? Like, how would you use that? How would you use that experience? So the more you can do that, the better.
Awesome. I'm going to pile on the be authentic and unique topic, where that's something that I often talk to my students about. I go, they say, oh, Mr. Tickle, my story's not different enough. It's not unique enough. And I say, look, let's first lean into authenticity, right? Because, again, forgive me if I'm wrong. I don't know that any of us have lived lives that are so unique that things that have happened in our lives have not happened in other people's lives, but it's manifested in a different way, right? That does make the experience unique. So I say, please stop thinking about being unique first. Be authentic. And then, because since only you have lived that life, there's going to be a unique thread in there, right? But don't start with, I need to find something super different about myself, because you may not have something that's super different, but the way you interpreted it, the way you rebounded from it, the way you were transformed by it, that will be unique to you.
Absolutely. I mean, and I tell students all the time, and I think this is one of the things that in the admissions ether sometimes gets a little confusing, but I have had essays that made me laugh. I had essays that made me cry. I had essays that made me go, I can't believe you're writing about this. Like I've had all sorts of those. It doesn't have to be this like really weird, wacky thing. I think actually some of my favorite and most compelling essays were just about something kind of basic. And what we do at Quad is we work with students and we say, okay, tell me some things about yourself. Tell me some things that you like to do. And then we kind of work and come up with a narrative that makes sense. But I'll just say, like, it doesn't have to be this like monumental, like earth-shattering essay that does it. So, but I'll say, like, it can just be about yourself, and that sounds really easy in some ways, but really hard in other ways. But and all that to say, like for step 6, like ed and proofread, like I would say, most of the students I work with, we go through about 3 to 5 drafts before we like get to a point where like, okay, this is kind of good. Some students are really good essay writers. Some could be really, really good students, but they just can't write an essay. But we work with those. But all to say, like, it's definitely something you don't want to do at the last minute. It's something that you can do, during the summer. Like oftentimes, like most colleges will announce all their essay prompts, and if they have supplemental ones, which normally don't change, but even if they do, typically in the middle of July, like there's no hard and fast date, but they announce those. So that's a great time to get them done. Like, the more you can get it done, because senior year gets real busy real fast, but the more time you give yourself, the better off we can help you.
And I think in terms of the work we do at Quad, this is, I think, really where some of the value exists. So the edit and proofread kind of seems like the culminating part of the essay writing process. But when you're working with a consultant, the editing and proofing and revising, that's an organic and continuous process that we end with a perfectly finished product. We don't wait till the end and then come into the end and revise it for you. We're walking with you along the way so that you're building it as you go. So that's one of the other great takeaways of that. The edit and proofread, that's part of the journey. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll tell you, like, I'm sure Darryl has a very similar approach, but I tell all my students, I'm never going to tell you write this. What I'm going to do is ask you questions. What did it feel like? What did it look like? What did it smell like? What did it taste like? How'd you feel? What was going on that day? What music did you put on to get yourself pumped up? What did your mom tell you? Like all that's like whatever the topic is, I just ask questions and I say answer them. Like, and that's how I do it. Everyone's got a little bit different, but yeah.
You'll like us.
Yeah.
All right. What's next?
All right, so we're just going to talk briefly about interviews and how to talk about this question on the interviews. And I think that a lot of it's going to be the same as we've talked about. So any thoughts that you both have here specific to interviews would be great. And then we will start the Q&A.
All right. I'd say the first point is an obvious and brilliant one. Reflect on yourself. The thing I say about the interview, your college application is it's a profile of information that happened 13, 14, 15, 16 years old, right? Where your interview gives the person who's interacting with you a snapshot of who you are now. And that's one of the things I really think is powerful about the interview. You can, in many ways, completely control the narrative because you're there in real time. But what it really does is it presents who you are now. So you can take credit for all the great work you've done. You can explain any bumps in the road that you might have, and you can, in a really, what I like to say, palpable way, express your enthusiasm, express your interest, express your good fit.
Yep, absolutely. I mean, so when I was a grad assistant at Vanderbilt, I remember like we actually piloted our alumni interview program. So I was kind of in charge of that as one of the things I did. And I think sometimes I told a lot of my families this. The word interview, especially to like parent ears, sounds like job interview. And so that's it is evaluative, yes. But at the same token, I tell students like, yeah, they're asking you questions and you're kind of like verbalizing a lot of your application. Like the interviewer almost certainly does not have any of your academic record at all. But it's also a chance for you as a student to say, hey, why'd you pick here? Like you clearly picked this university, you liked it. Where else did you apply? What did your college search look like? So it's just as much for you as is for them. So it's it's important. Again, it can be evaluative. Not every college does it. Like it just kind of depends. But all that to say, like, this is your chance to kind of verbalize like what you want to highlight.
And then the highlight your connections, specific programs, majors, courses that interest you and why they connect with your academic interests and goals. Essentially, your interview, doesn't it kind of sound like those essay questions verbalized? Right?
Mm-hmm.
You're coming in, and again, you're telling them the stuff that you just wrote an essay about a couple days ago before you had this interview, and expressing to them the things that you really find connections both academically and otherwise with that institution. Very likely, it's an admissions person who's interviewing you, and they're intimately aware of the things that go on there. Or it's a current student intern who works in the admissions office who just loves being there and they're volunteering their time. Or it's an alum who, to stay connected to the college, who comes there for every parent weekend, reunion, orientation. They know exactly what's going on campus, and students who can reiterate to them, these are the things that make me love Tufts, make me love Vanderbilt, what have you. They resonate in a way that let that interviewer know that it's a good match for you because you've done your research.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, exactly, as we've said, like, show them that you know them. And for step 3 here, like, demonstrate your knowledge. If something cool happened on campus, if they have like a speaker came to campus, or they're like, I know at Vanderbilt we had a concert every spring called Rites of Spring. You could mention Rites of Spring. I saw Rites of Spring. This artist came. Like, that would be kind of cool. Or this professor got this award, or this professor was, acknowledged. Like that, any of that stuff. Or even we won this, athletic event. That's cool too. Anything like that. But again, show them that you know them. They know it's a good school. They know Wharton's a great school. They know there's lots of things to do in these cities. What do you want to do with it? Like, what specifically would you do with that experience?
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Step 4, personalize your response. Make your answers personal, sharing anecdotes and experiences that led you to develop an interest in that college. Again, this is that specificity, right? That authenticity that we've been telling you to lean into. Make sure that first, be thoughtful about your answers and take time to understand what they're asking you, and then being able to talk, from what we say, the I perspective. I really love the energy in the classroom. I really love that students on campus reach out to the surrounding community. I really love that students study abroad to places where they're doing impactful work that align with their academic majors, right? So to talk about the things that you or I am turned on by that college.
Absolutely. And also another great resource, and I think a lot of students like sometimes overlook this or don't necessarily think about it. You have classmates who probably went to that place. Like, so like every high school's got their favorites, but there's places I always say, like, these are like every high school I've worked at, I go, okay, our bread and butter schools, like the ones that everybody is applying to, public, private, what have you. But I'll also say, like, go experience like that campus with them. Go eat in the dining hall. Go on the tour. Go to class. My physics professor is just like Mr. So-and-so in our high school. Like that's good stuff, and that can also help you with these Why Us essays and your interview.
Excellent. And then with all of your interaction, both interviews and your writing and encounters, be authentic and engaging. Right? Be authentic, right? Because they really do need to know who you are, and you don't have to put on a front. You are already excellent, and they don't want someone that you're trying to be. They want exactly who you are, and they need to find out who that is. And they've got thousands and thousands of people they need to sort out. So let them know who you are, right? And be engaging. I think some people are maybe more outgoing than others, but in this admissions journey, maybe halfway through your senior year, through your junior year, through halfway through your senior year, that's the whole experience, right? The application experience. So when you encounter people, whether they be students, whether they be admissions people, whether they be alums, whether they be people that you meet at a college fair, engage them because they probably have some information that's valuable to you. And in some cases, you might be able to exchange some information to them that they might be able to transfer to somebody who's valuable in this process.
Yep. Absolutely. And I would say, like, again, the interview, again, especially the parent ears kind of like sends off, bells and whistles and whatnot. But I always say you want to look like business casual works great. If you're at a school that has a uniform, your school uniform is fine. Like that's always fine. But I tell students, don't look like you're running for Senate, but also don't look like you rolled in from Coachella last night. Like there's a difference. I will never forget. When I was a tour guide at Vanderbilt in the summer in Tennessee. It's a boy from Atlanta. He had a blazer on, khakis, and I said to him, I went, dude, you didn't have to wear all that. He's like, my mom made me. And I went, all right, that makes sense. So all that to say, like, business casual is fine. You don't have to wear a suit. You don't have to get crazy formal. Also, please do not show up at your Vanderbilt interview with a Duke shirt, which happened one time. It's just little things like that. So anyway, all that to say, yeah. So just, but be yourself. It's not as stressful as it thinks. I would say, I think Darryl's probably had this experience too. I have so many students like, oh my God, I'm so nervous. And I'm like, how was it? Like, oh, it's great. I'm babysitting for the next week. So that happens. So
great. Amen.
Yeah.
Amen.
All right. Well, thank you both. If anyone has questions, definitely pop them in the Q&A box. We'll give it another minute. I know that we are at our hour mark, but if anyone has any questions, we're happy to, don't worry. We're happy to answer one or two. But in the meantime, Darryl, Nick, any other advice that we didn't necessarily cover today that you have for our prospective students?
I think, as we think about this topic, the why this college essay, I again say, think about that two-way street. You want them to evaluate why you, right? So you should be able to communicate to them why you like their place. It's a really good balance in this process. And it's one that, while it seems like it's a lot to untangle, it's less arduous than you think. And we're outstanding at helping you untangle those strings, right? It's this is a very important venture, right? If you're a student or you're a parent, it's a super costly venture. So I think having good advice is essential, right? It's vital. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I would say, like, I think the two most important takeaways I hope everyone gets from this is that, first off, Darryl and I worked at highly selective places, and we can give you advice and we can tell you like what it is and what it isn't. So on one hand, like, I hope you realize, like, admissions people are like you. They're just people. Like, they're just, and they're looking for many of the things you are. And I also say, I'll never forget this. I was like standing outside one of the schools I worked at. My school is very community focused. So this mom came up to me and she said, I don't know you. I feel like I should know you. And that's kind of my school. We're very community focused there. And she came up and I said, oh yeah, my name is Nick. I'm director of college counseling here. She says, okay, well, I have an 8th grader, so I'm a little bit far away from this process. But if you had to give one piece of advice to families, what would it be? And I never really thought of that. So I kind of reflected for a second and I said, trust the experts, not the noise. There's questions every day I get over email, text, phone calls I had with families, meetings with families. I heard that my neighbor said, well, my friend said, well, my cousin said, well, this, like, there's a lot of that. And I get it. I remember being in high school and having all that. So all that to say, like, people at Quad, like myself, like, even if I don't have like firsthand experience working at school, chances are one of my colleagues did. And I can say, hey, what kind of things, might be helpful to know? What sort of things am I not aware of that a student might be interested in? So that's what I'd say. There's a lot of like stuff out there, but all that to say, like, that's exactly why you got folks like us to tell you kind of exactly this is what we're going with.
All right. Well, thank you both so much. I want to thank everyone who joined us today. It was so great to have you all here. And Nick, Darryl, a pleasure as always. Thank you for all of your information. I know I learned a lot. I'm sure other folks did as well. I hope everyone has a really great rest of their evening. And hopefully we'll see you at one of our future webinars.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming out tonight. And Darryl, thank you so much for, your camaraderie. Like, I feel like we were singing the same song. So that was good.
This is a gas. I look forward to doing it again. And everyone out there who joined us, thank you so much. And and please follow up with any questions or insight that we can shine light on for you.
Absolutely.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.